You know, for 1,000 years, one single empire held the known world together. It built these incredible cities of marble, roads that seemed to go on forever, and a peace that lasted for generations. But empires, well, like all things, they fall. So, this is the story of what happened next. It's a story of total collapse, of pure chaos, and of a slow, brutal, but absolutely brilliant rebirth.
So picture this. It's the year 476, the very last emperor of the Western Roman Empire. He was just a kid, really, named Romulus Augustulus, is kicked off the throne by a Germanic chieftain named Odoacer. There's no epic battle, no grand finale, just a quiet, final breath. And just like that, the central power that held Europe together for centuries is simply gone.
And what rushed in to fill its place? A power vacuum so huge it would swallow civilization whole.
So what does that even mean, the fall of Rome, for the actual people who had to live through it? This wasn't just some political shift. No, for millions, it was literally the end of their world.
This whole era, we often call it the Dark Ages, was really defined by everything that was lost. I mean, the giant centralized machine of Rome that had managed everything from trade to security, it just stopped working. And the consequences were, they were catastrophic. The great cities, they emptied out. Those incredible Roman roads just decayed, cutting everyone off from each other. Long-distance trade, which was the lifeblood of the empire, it just vanished. Being able to read and write, that became something only a handful of people in the church could do. And maybe the most terrifying thing of all, security was just a memory. Without the Roman legions, life became small, local, fragmented, and incredibly violent.
So when you look at this complete and total breakdown of society, the real question isn't just what happened, it's how did anyone climb out of this? How on earth did a new civilization manage to build itself from these ruins?
For centuries, there was no answer. Europe was just this messy patchwork of kingdoms all at war with each other. But then, a single figure emerged, a leader with an ambition as massive as the old empire itself.
This guy, he was a Frankish king, a brilliant and totally ruthless warrior who had this crazy idea that he could bring back a unified Christian West. His name was Charles the Great, or as we all know him, Charlemagne.
Just look at this timeline. In only a few decades, Charlemagne conquered and united most of Western Europe. Then, on Christmas Day in the year 800, the Pope crowns him Emperor of the Romans, the first one in the West in over 300 years. For a little while, it really seemed like the glory of Rome was back. But here's the problem. His empire was built on his personality, on personal loyalty. It didn't have the deep-rooted infrastructure to last. So after he died, his grandsons basically just tore it apart, and that dream of unity shattered all over again.
And you know, the timing for this new collapse? It absolutely could not have been worse. Just as Europe's only big power fell apart, a brand new wave of terror came crashing down, and not just from one direction, but from all of them at once.
The threat was coming from everywhere. From the north, you had Viking longships terrorizing not just the coasts, but deep up the rivers. From the east, Magyar horsemen were plundering any settlement they could find. And from the south, Muslim raiders were hitting the Mediterranean shores. Europe was completely under siege, and its weak kings could do absolutely nothing to protect their people.
So think about it. If the king can't protect you, who can? Well, the local strongman can, the guy with the biggest walls and the toughest soldiers. And this is how the feudal system is born. In a world with no real security, power became super localized. Local lords built castles, they raised these armies of armored knights, and they offered protection to the peasants living nearby. And in exchange for that safety, those peasants owed them work and loyalty. It was a brutal, messy system, but it was born out of pure necessity. So, as Europe begins to slowly stabilize under this new feudal order, two massive forces are about to define the next few centuries: an unimaginable religious passion and a biological disaster that would make every war that came before it look small.
Okay, so in 1095, Pope Urban II gives a sermon that just sets the world on fire. He calls on the knights of Christendom, these very same warriors who were defining the feudal age, to stop fighting each other and turn their swords against a common enemy. His call to take back Jerusalem launched the Crusades. We're talking 2 centuries of incredibly brutal warfare that really showed the rising power of a unified Catholic Church.
The Crusaders, they truly believed they were fighting a battle for the fate of the entire world. They had absolutely no idea that an enemy far more deadly than any army was already quietly making its way toward them, right along the trade routes from the east.
1/3. Seriously, just let that number sink in for a minute. Between 1347 and 1351, the Black Death just ripped across the continent. It was a completely apocalyptic event. It wiped out entire towns. In some places, it killed up to half the population. This was a catastrophe on a scale that humanity had never seen before or since.
Now, you would think a disaster of that magnitude would be the end, right? The final nail in the coffin. But history is just full of these weird twists. As horrific as it was, the Black Death actually created a brand new world for the people who survived. It kicked off a chain of events that would, believe it or not, end the medieval era.
I mean, just look at this comparison. It shows you the incredible shift. Before the plague, you had this huge population of peasants who were basically tied to the land, totally controlled by feudal lords. But after the plague, with so many people gone, labor was suddenly rare, and it was valuable. Peasants could demand better pay, more freedom. They could even pack up and leave their lord's land. The old feudal power structure was completely shattered.
And out of this chaos, creativity just exploded. You get new sources of power, like way better water and windmills, that totally transform how things are made. You get new vision, literally, with eyeglasses, which basically doubles the working life of scholars and craftsmen. You get new weapons, like gunpowder and cannons, that make the old feudal castle pretty much obsolete. And then, the ultimate game changer, the printing press, which let new ideas spread with just breathtaking speed.
So you've got this social upheaval and all this new technology, and it's all setting the stage for a totally new kind of power. The age of the local lord was coming to an end. The age of the king and of the nation was just about to begin.
And you can see this change happening all across the continent. In France, the 100 Years' War forged a real sense of national identity. In Spain, the marriage of Ferdinand and Isabella united the country, finishing off this centuries-long project to reconquer the peninsula. In England, kings were consolidating their power. These weren't just loose feudal networks anymore. These were centralized states, with powerful kings commanding these new gunpowder armies.
And when you have this new power, this new stability, and all this new technology, a resurgent Europe, for the first time in 1,000 years, started to look beyond its own borders. The ambition wasn't just to survive anymore, it was to explore and to expand.
And that ambition turned into action fast. In 1492, funded by a newly unified Spain, Columbus sails across the Atlantic. Just a little while later, Portugal pioneers a sea route all the way around Africa to India. The medieval world was officially over. The modern, global age had just been born.
So from the absolute ashes of Rome, through centuries of invasion, feudalism, holy war, and plague, a new civilization had finally emerged. It was a 1,000-year journey from total darkness back into the light. Europe wasn't just reborn, it had been reforged into something new, something powerful, something that would go on to reshape the entire planet.